thank you to everyone who made this possible, everyone who took their time to do this. I think it's one of the exciting things, many exciting things that happens at Eyer Junior High School. And I'm really pleased that all of you could be here this evening, and as parents and students alike. Now I'll turn it over to Mr. Fritzinger, who will give you a brief overview of what's going to happen this evening. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Waddell, and good evening. Mom and Dad, welcome to the first Civil War night, one of many, I hope. This was something that I had liked to plan a couple of years ago, but it never reached or blossomed to what I intended it. And last year I did talk to Dr. Waddell, and I said if there was a possibility that we get the right class and the right students to get involved, that I'd really like to do it. Well, this year I had some kids that came up with the unexpected. And I thought this was a good group to get involved in this type of program. And so I need one more ingredient. And I was talking to Mrs. Basileris, and that was my ingredient, because as soon as I mentioned that, we were off and running. What we did was we divided up the students into committees, and we had them do all the research. So what you see here tonight and what you see out there in the cafeteria after the show is all of their work. They're planning research, they're discussing, they're talking, they're going to other libraries other than our own here, and we do have a fine library, but there were other things they wanted to dig into deeper, and so they did. So what they present to you tonight is what they've done and they've worked hard on for the last 2.5 months. I would want to say that Mrs. Basileris really helped these students so much, preparing the program on the stage. My part was just keep them organized as best as I could, and lots of times it was confusing and running here, running there, but we all got it done. And I hope that the surprise they did by surprising me will also surprise you here tonight. I'd like to introduce our narrator, Andrea Kiesel, who will narrate the program for this evening.
Civil War, the War of the Rebellion, and the War between the states are just a few of the many names given to the conflict which raged in our country from 1860 through 1865. It was a time that changed the whole nation's way of life forever. No matter what the name was, this war traumatized the North and the South for generations afterward. There is no other war in our history as a nation that all the casualties were American. The death toll was over 700,000. We, as a class, have researched this great Civil War from each of its battles to its lifestyles, northern and southern. Now we present to you what we have learned about the music, dances, clothing, food, and people. We hope that you will learn, as we have learned, by touch, smell, taste, feel, and sound these Civil War times. The Civil War soldier spent most of his time doing the same things that today's soldier does: drilling, polishing, digging, and waiting for something to happen. When not drilling or working, he played cards, chess, checkers, made pipes, and wrote letters. Probably the most favorite off-duty activity was writing home to parents, wives, or girlfriends. Letters were obviously handwritten, with no computers, word processors, or spell checkers. Music was one of the pastimes that could help soldiers deal with their feelings about leaving their families, about seeing their buddies die beside them, and about their beliefs in severed causes. Music was a common link between the Confederate and the Union soldiers. Soldiers on both sides would sing the same tune, just changing the words to fit their own cause. Even Battle Hymn in Dixie had verses changed. On the eve of the Battle of Chancellorsville, the soldiers from the opposing camps sang and serenaded each other with voice, harmonica, and banjo. Both sides shared the same loneliness, despair, and fear that comes before facing the eve of the battle. Aaron Weston has prepared a Civil War medley of songs for your enjoyment. Can I Go Dearest Mother will be sung by David Basileros. Little Major will be sung by Jennifer Letts and Leslie Young. Beautiful Dreamer will be sung by Jennifer Coe. O Come You from the Battlefield will be sung by Evan Roth and Jody Swanee, all being accompanied by Aaron Watson.
I am writing to mother.
One night, early in the war, Julia Ward Howe, wife of a Washington civil service official, watched from her hotel room as a dispirited Union column marched through the streets. Disturbed by this expression of low morale and hopelessness, she went to bed deeply depressed. In the middle of the night, she arose, went to a writing desk, and scribbled some words hastily. Next morning, dimly aware of being up in the night, she went to the desk and found she had written a short poem. It was so good that she changed only a few words. Mrs. Howe sold the poem to the Atlantic Monthly for $4. Before long, the entire North was singing its stirring stanzas to the tune of John Brown's Body. Its new name was Battle Hymn of the Republic. Please sing along with us, following Evan Roth as director.
We'll be singing one verse, and the words are in your program and on a white sheet. Please, everybody, join in.
Dixieland was an American folk song with words written by a Yankee and became the rallying cry of the Confederacy. Please sing along with us, following Evan Roth as director.
Thank you.
Another favorite pastime for all was dancing. The dances differed greatly from anything we have now. They were everything from formal to square dances held at barn raisings. It was not unusual before the war for parties to start at noon and go through the night with the midnight supper between rounds of dancing. Tonight, 3 couples will dance to Polonaise and Polka Mazurka. The couples are Jeannie Sanasuso and Ray Griffin, Nevin Schuick and Jackie Palmquist, Dave Vassaleros and Holly Davis. Now I will turn the mic over to Jeannie Sanasuso, who will explain more about the dances.
The first dance which will be performed tonight is called the Polonaise. It is a stately court dance which originated in the 16th century. Usually used to open up a ball, the popularity of this dance spread to America in the 18th century. The second dance is called the Polka Mazurka, a sprightly dance that originated in the 17th century. It was usually used to end balls and wind up a night of festivities. Please enjoy.
section is a little different. The students performing researched and worked on the biography of a famous Civil War character. There are many stories known about Grant and Lee. Robert E. Lee was known by all who knew him as a gentleman with honor, manners, and humility. One story about Lee happened on his army's march to Gettysburg. As the Southern boys marched through Chambersburg, Pennsylvania, some of the women of the town taunted them. One wrapped herself in the American flag and jeered, "Come and take it if you can." When one sang the Star-Spangled Banner, Levis took off his hat and bowed in the saddle. Watching the humble but impressive Southern leader go by, one woman murmured, "Oh, I wish he were ours." Lincoln had offered lead command to the Northern armies at the outbreak of the war, but after a sleepless night, filled with prayer and anguish, he declined, saying that he could never pick up a gun against anyone in his own family, even though his heart was with the cause of the North. U.S. Grant was not the most respected by his peers. Lincoln had a terrible time trying to find a general who would and could defeat Lee. Grant was the only Northern general consistently winning battles. The story about Grant is probably apocryphal that when Lincoln's advisors told him not to appoint a man with such a reputation for drinking, the president replied, "Find out what brand he drinks and send some of it to my other generals." It is known that he said, "I can't spare this man, he fights." Walt Whitman will be played by Justin Carratt. The poem Captain, My Captain will be read by Jeannie Sanasuso. The young Mary Todd Lincoln will be Shelley Miller, interviewed by Ben Linsenmacher. John Calhoun versus Daniel Webster will be Evan Ross and Josh Burke. The aide to General U.S. Grant is Seth Thompson, and aide to General Robert E. Lee is Mike Reichert. Please sit back and enjoy the personalities who made the Civil War unforgettable.
Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. My name is John Madison. I am a friend of Walter Whitman, who had to be the greatest American poet during the Civil War period. Born on May 31st, 1819, to his mother, Melissa Van Vessler Whitman, and her carpenter husband, Walter Whitman. For the first 20 years of his life, he worked as an editor and printer for such papers as The Star, The Aurora, The Crescent, and The Long Islander. He shortly gained a love for poetry and wrote many inspirational poems, such as The Leaves of Grass, Children of Adam, Malice, and a patriotic poem, Beat Beat Drums. But one of his more famous poems, O Captain, My Captain, written in 1865 for the death of Lincoln, was truly inspirational. Not only a poet, Walter Whitman was a great supporter of the Western movement of the country under the Free Soil laws. Many people know Walt Whitman as a poet, printer, or even writer, but I'm proud to say that I know him as a friend. Thank you.
O Captain, My Captain, by Walt Whitman. O Captain, my Captain, our fearful trip is done. The ship has weathered every rack. The prize we sought is won. The port is near, the bells I hear, the people all exulting, while follow eyes the steady keel, the vessel grim and daring. But oh heart, 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 oh the bleeding drops of red, where on the deck my captain lies, fallen, cold and dead. O Captain, my Captain, rise up and hear the bells. Rise up, for you the flag is flung, for you the bugle trills, for you bouquets and ribbon wreaths, for you the shores are crowding, for you they call the swaying mass, their eager faces turning. Dear Captain, dear Father, this arm beneath your head, it is some dream that on the deck you've fallen cold and dead. My Captain does not answer, his lips are pale and still. My father does not feel my arm, he has no pulse nor will. The ship is anchored safe and sound, its voyage closed and done. From fearful trip the victor ship comes in with object won. Exalt, O shores, and ring, O bells, but I, with mournful tread, walk the deck my captain lies, fallen cold and dead.
Mary Todd Lincoln, I presume?
Yes?
Hi, my name is Peter Jennings. I'm from ABC News. I'm here to interview you for Person of the Week.
News? Like the Gazette or Washington Post?
Yeah, something like that. Just a couple basic questions. Something about your family, your siblings, your mother. Well, of course, a few questions about Abraham.
Abraham?
Yes. Let's start with, why don't you tell me about your childhood?
Well, I was born in Lexington, Kentucky. My mother died when I was only 6. That was really hard. But I had all my brothers and sisters. I
have Elizabeth and Francis, and Levi and George, whom she died giving birth to. I also have my father. He soon remarried Betsy Humphreys. My father instructed us to call her Mother, and I guess in a way she deserved it. She did take in 6 of us children, and still carried 6 of her own for my father.
Where did you have your schooling at?
Well, after my mother died, my older sister Elizabeth, well, she left for Springfield, Illinois to get married. My father felt that I'd be feeling lost, so he sent me to a boarding school of Madame Victory Charlotte Leclerc Natal. I was taught literature, piano, drama. I was voted the most fun-loving and most popular girl in class. When I graduated, my father bought me a new wardrobe.
You speak often of your father. Tell me a little about him.
Well, he was a very great man.
Wasn't he the one with the very small neck?
Yes, he was unfortunate to have the Todd neck, which was technically no neck, but he dressed himself very fine. He was into politics.
Politics. Tell me a little about those.
Well, he was, I guess, what you would call a political figure. Excuse me. Figure in Lexington, and well, he had many political friends, Henry Clay, Richard Menifee, and, well, I always had quite an admiration for Mr. Clay.
What about the parties?
Well, in Lexington, we threw many parties. It was my father and all his political friends, and we danced and mint juleps.
Grasshoppers?
Mint juleps. They were granulated sugar and limestone water with a touch of mint.
Didn't you later in your life move to Springfield to live with your sister?
Yes, well, Elizabeth was up in Springfield, as I said before. She had just gotten married to Minnie and Edward, and my other sister Frances went to live with her. Then after Frances got married, well, Elizabeth said there was a vacancy in her house, so I had to go. That's the invitation signed myself a husband.
Yes. Didn't you then meet Mr. Stephen Douglas?
Yes, I met Stephen Douglas in Springfield. I should say first, in Springfield, it's, I guess you would call it a custom. For when unmarried women come to Springfield to live permanently, they place a lighted candle in their window. It's kind of like a signal for unmarried men to know that she's staying permanently and to come and visit. And Stephen Douglas was one of my first callers. We spent a lot of time together.
Then later on you met Abraham Lincoln. Tell me what you thought when you first met him.
Well, my gosh, he had the longest face I've ever seen. But seriously, it was around the election of 1840. There were many debates going on, practically every night of the week. I tried to attend as often as possible. At one particular meeting, there was a little argument going on between party members, and Abraham, who liked to listen to his proceedings from his office upstairs, dropped through a trap door onto the stage. It was hilarious. Well, he reminded everybody that every man has the right to freedom of speech. And, well, he was a giant compared to all of us. I'd say 12 feet from where I was sitting. But, no, nobody was going to pull him down from the stage, and he had the longest face.
How did he compare to Stephen Douglas?
Well, just looking at them, Abraham, well, he was very tall, as I said before. Stephen Douglas, well, he was quite short. But, appearance wasn't all. I think it went further than that. Political views, slavery was a big issue. Stephen went along with my father. They didn't like slavery in particular, but it was the business of the South, and they had to go along with it. Abraham shared my view. We thought slavery was terrible. Definitely thought it should be abolished.
When did that special spark happen? I mean, when did you really know that you loved Abraham Lincoln?
I think always knew that I loved Abraham Lincoln, that he was going to be my husband in the future. Well, when I first told Elizabeth, my older sister, she didn't understand. She asked me how I could love a man that couldn't provide for me like Stephen Douglas could. But she didn't understand. Abraham and I were very much alike. We were born in the same part of Kentucky, well, around the area, and our mothers died when we were very young. We liked to read by the fireplace. Well, I just felt that I could give Abraham something. Well, Elizabeth just didn't understand that. Well, when I first met Abraham, he was like a hypochondriac. He worried, he slept little. Elizabeth just didn't understand. I'm sorry for getting so upset.
It's all right. I didn't mean to upset you. But didn't you soon start dating?
Dating? Do you mean courtship?
If you will, yes. The history books say it was very stormy.
Our courtship wasn't stormy. It was different.
Stormy.
Well, sometimes go away to other states for debates. And he said he'd write. He never did. But I'm sure he was too busy with politics and stuff. When he came home, he visited. Well, sometimes visited very late at night. But I just saw a part of Abraham that no one really saw before, I think.
When did you two actually get married?
The sad thing is, we were supposed to get married one New Year's Day at Elizabeth's house. Just a little ceremony, ministering, just us and Elizabeth. Well, he never showed up, and I didn't see him again for 2 years.
It must have been very hard. How did you cope with it?
Well, I started making dresses, and I did a little odd job, and I just tried to keep myself busy. A good Southern woman does not show her feelings in public, so I covered up pretty well, I guess. Well, when I saw him after 2 years, we fell in love all over again. And we were officially married then, November 4th, 1842. And my wedding band inscribed, "Love is eternal," something he said to me before his 2-year absence.
How did your marriage affect your relationship with your family, being from the South?
Well, my family, I guess you could say, disowned me. The South thought I was a traitor, and the North, they thought I was a spy. But I stuck by Abraham, because I loved him very much, and, well, throughout my life, I stuck by Abraham. And though I made lots of sacrifices, I still say I do it all again, because love is eternal.
I am Senator John C. Calhoun from the glorious state of South Carolina. My fellow senators, I have believed from the first that the agitation of the subject of slavery would, if not prevented by some timely and effective measure, end in disunion. The agitation has been permitted to proceed until it has reached a period when it can no longer be denied that the Union is in danger. How can the Union be preserved? The first question then is, what is it that has endangered the Union? One of the causes is to be traced to the long-continued agitation of the slave question on the part of the North and the many aggressions which they have made on the rights of the South during that time. The South asked for justice, simple justice, and less she ought not to take. She has already surrendered so much that she has little left to surrender. The North has only to will it, to accomplish it, to do justice by conceding to the South an equal right in the acquired territory, and to do her duty by causing the stipulations relative to the fugitive slaves to be faithfully fulfilled, to cease the agitation of the slave question. But will the North agree to do this? It is for her to answer this question, but I will say she cannot refuse it if she has half the love of the Union, which she professes to the charge that her love of power and aggrandizement is far greater than her love of the Union. At all events, the responsibility of saving the Union rests on the North and not on the South.
My name is Senator Daniel Webster from Massachusetts. I wish to speak today, not as a Massachusetts man, nor as a Northerner. I wish to speak today as an American and a member of the Senate of the United States of America. I speak today for preservation of the Union. I hear with pain and anguish and distress the word secession, especially when it falls from the lips of those who are eminently patriotic and known to the country and known all over the world for their political services. Secession, peaceable secession. Sir, your eyes and mine are never destined to see that miracle. There can be no such thing as peaceable secession. Peaceable secession is an utter impossibility. Peaceful secession, the concurrent agreement of all the members of this great republic to separate. Why? What would be the result? What is to remain American? What am I to be? An American no longer? Where is the flag of the republic to remain? Why, sir? Our ancestors, our fathers, our grandfathers would rebuke and reproach us, and our children and grandchildren would cry out shame upon us.
Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. My name is Charles Mosley, and tonight I'm going to tell you about one of the most inspirational, if not the most inspirational men during the Civil War era. Yes, Ulysses Simpson Grant. First of all, I'm going to tell you about a few of the qualities that made him such a great man. First, he was loyal. Well, one time I heard him say, there are but two parties now, traitors and patriots, and I hereafter wish to be ranked with the latter. The man was also determined. It was a common saying around camp that General Grant looked as if he was going to put his head through the wall. He also had a great ability to concentrate, and with his concentration, he made well-thought-out plans, thereby instilling confidence in all around him. But with this confidence, there was also insecurity sometimes. Why, one day I remember, it was our first night in the wilderness, and I heard the man crying in the tent. Now, through all this, he still remained humble. And in Washington, everyone loved him. I mean, he was the only general winning battles while others were losing. Yet, General Grant really hated Washington. He felt it was a bad place for an honest soldier. General Grant's rise to stardom really is quite shocking, considering 3 years before, he was unknown, unhappy, and noted only for consistently failing. But in fact, Ulysses Simpson Grant isn't even his real name. He was born in 1822, Hiram Ulysses Grant, but when he registered at West Point, a clerk wrote down Ulysses Simpson Grant, and Grant wasn't one to argue, so the name stuck. Of all the things I admire about Mr. Grant, I admire his bravery in the face of danger the most. One time, when all the troops were talking about Lee's greatness, General Grant blurted out, "I'm tired of hearing about Bobby Lee. He thinks he's going to do a double somersault and land in our rear. Quit thinking about what he's going to do to you and what you're going to do to him." The fact remains, however, that General Grant was human. Although he was the commander of 532,000 troops, he was also one of many picky habits. He would not eat meat if it had blood on it and with bloodiest flavor. And he also drank more than his fair share of alcohol. In fact,
The man really wasn't physically impressive, and he promoted a more relaxed atmosphere about him. One of his favorite sayings was, "I recognize only two tunes. One's Yankee Doodle and the other isn't." Ladies and gentlemen, Ulysses Simpson Grant helped us win the war, and we should all be in debt to him. Thank you.
Hello, my name is Richard McHenry, and I'm here to tell you about Confederate General Robert E. Lee. Robert E. Lee was born on January 19, 1807, in Stratford Hall, Virginia. Now, me and Robert grew up together, and we spent most of our childhood in his father's library studying for school. At age 18, we both entered the United States Military Academy, where he graduated with the highest honors. After graduation, we entered the Corps of Engineers, where he quickly became the second lieutenant. And then he was moved to Fort Monroe, where he married Mary Ann Custis in 1831. That was the last I saw of my good friend, Robert, but we kept in touch through letters. He told me how he was made superintendent at West Point, and he held that position for 3 years. Then he was sent to Texas to protect the Texas frontier from the Apache and Comanche Indians. When John Brown attacked Harper's Ferry, General Lee was sent to apprehend him, which he did rather quickly with few casualties. Lee didn't know which side to choose when the Civil War started. He was from the South, but he opposed slavery. When Abraham Lincoln offered him a commanding position in the Union Army, Lee couldn't find it in himself to fight against his own family, so he declined and joined the Confederate Army. He started out as an advisor to Jefferson Davis, and when General Joseph Johnson was wounded, he was given his army. Lee's Army of Northern Virginia had fierce battles during the Wilderness Campaign and had to retreat. After that, Lee was made the commander-in-chief of all Confederate armies. When the retreat was cut off at Appomattox Courthouse, Lee was forced to surrender. General Ulysses S. Grant was kind to the Confederates by letting him keep all their personal possessions and horses. This ended the war and also ended Robert E. Lee's military career. After 40 years at military service, he became a private citizen in Lexington, Virginia. He also became president of the Washington College. Over the next years, his health withered away, and then he died at age 63 on October 12, 1870. His death was viewed as a public loss, not only to the South, but to the North as well. Thank you.
Clothing throughout history sets apart the times and the people. The beautiful Civil War dresses, as well as the military uniforms, are unique and very foreign to our society of jeans and t-shirts. Although the costumes are not exact replicas, you can catch a flavor of the times. The clothing will be explained by our clothing committee.
Good evening, and welcome to our 1860 fashion show. Our first couple is from the north. Seth is wearing his dress uniform. It consists of a long, single-breasted dark blue dress coat, a dark blue jacket called a blouse, blue trousers, rough black shoes known to the soldiers as gunboats, and a wool flannel shirt. The gold tassels on his shoulders indicate that he is an officer in the cavalry. At the start of the war, some soldiers received their uniforms from state or local sources. Some received uniforms that were sturdy and of the same cloth, pattern, and color. However, shades of the soldiers' uniforms often varied. This was because the need for uniforms was placed on women's sewing circles. Sometimes the results were gratifying, but more often than not, what the women did not have in skill, they made up for with enthusiasm. Surprisingly, in the beginning, gray was the favorite color for the Union volunteer soldiers' uniforms. The gray cloth was sturdier and better made than the blue. This caused problems at some battles. Only starting in 1862 did all Union soldiers wear blue. Quantity of uniforms soon became a problem. Rapid movement made it hard to obtain clothing and punishment.
Sarah's dress typifies that of a northern woman because of the simple styling and practicality of the dress. The
was seen not only in the north, but in rural areas of the south as well. Northern women tended to pattern their dresses after the conservative British style, and consequently, their dresses were often high-necked, with few of the fancy trims and laces of the extravagant South. Either a small hoop or several petticoats were worn to achieve a slightly response. As was customary, the hem of the wearer's dress was lifted to reveal a petticoat or underskirt of a contrasting fabric. As the war took its toll on the country, prices of cloth rose rapidly. By the end of the war, the lady's new bonnet would cost $250. Creative women began to make dresses similar to this one, out of curtains and mattress seeking, and bonnets out of corn husks, palmetto leaves, and straw. Our second couple is from the South. Mike is wearing part of what the Confederate government envisioned for its soldiers. He is wearing a single-breasted tunic of cadet gray with a single row of buttons and trimmings that signify he is an officer in the cavalry. His trousers are gray and cut loosely to fit over his shoes, which are black leather. The Confederate government could not provide uniforms for its army until 1862, when domestic manufacturers began producing cloth. Because of this, volunteer uniforms varied greatly in the beginning. The New Orleans Regiment wore blue, and other Confederates shot at them at the Battle of Shiloh until the regiment reversed their jackets so that the white interior was showing. When the blockade set in, gray became rare. Now uniforms were a yellowish brown, called butternut homespun, that came from the dye made of walnut hulls. When uniforms became increasingly scarce, Confederate soldiers sometimes stole uniforms and shoes from dead Yankees. Audrey's ball gown is a wonderful example of the height of Southern women's fashion. Styled after the French, the Southern bell gown is often low-cut and lavishly decorated. Lace is now available in dress length pieces, and no gown is ever truly complete without it. Lace was either black or white and was most fashionable when paired with satin of contrasting colors, as shown here. Of course, a large hoop or crinoline was always worn. In the 1840s, it began simply as a fitted horsehair petticoat, but the crinoline grew ridiculously large in 1865, when some dresses were 10 yards around the hem. Large crinolines were not restricted to wealthy women. Even girls working in the field wore hoops, providing considerably uncomfortable working conditions. The corset was worn underneath the crinoline in an attempt to reach the impossible waistline of 17 inches. Corsets were made of wood, whalebone, or metal, and many women even had ribs removed to slim themselves. Audrey wears a crocheted white bolero, or Spanish jacket, as was quite the race. Necklines for evening were always quite low, and bodices as well as skirts were often adorned with lace and beads. Here we have Sarah and Jess. As you can see, the children's fashions at the time resembled very much the adult fashion. Both gowns are very formal and extremely full. As you can see, around the bottom hemline is decorated with white lace, ribbons, and ribbons. Around the waist, pink ribbon is tied, and where the bow is, there's a cute little flower hanging in there. And the bottom is also decorated with white lace and ribbons, sewn to the ruffles surrounding the shoulders. If you notice, there's a little train on the back of the dress. Young girls like Sarah usually wore their hair up or down in ringlets and in braids. Thank you for attending our 1860 Bassin show.
Heather Tucker and Leslie Young have prepared a video with excerpts from the documentary The Civil War to give us a visual idea of this crucial time in our history.
Well, we still feel the passion of life to its top. In our youth, our hearts were touched with fire. Oliver Wendell Holmes. Had enough. The two great armies were converging on his farm. to what would be the first major battle of the Civil War, Bull Run, or Manassas as the Confederates called it, would soon rage across the aging Virginian's farm, a Union shell going so far as to explode in the summer kitchen. Now, McLean moved his family away from Manassas, far south and west of Richmond, out of harm's way, he prayed, to a dusty little crossroads called Appomattox Courthouse. And it was there in his living room 3.5 years later that Lee surrendered to Grant. Wilmer McLean could rightfully say, the war began in my front yard and ended in my front parlor. To St. Albans, Vermont, and Fernandina on the Florida coast. More than 3 million Americans fought in it, and over 600,000 men, 2% of the population, died in it. American homes became headquarters. American churches and schoolhouses sheltered the dying. Huge foraging armies swept across American farms and burned American towns. Americans slaughtered one another wholesale here in America, in their own cornfields and peach orchards, along familiar roads and by waters with old American names. In 2 days at Shiloh, on the banks of the Tennessee, more American men fell than in all previous American wars combined. At Cold Harbor, 7,000 Americans fell in 20 minutes. Most of the nation's 31 million people lived peaceably on farms and in small towns. At Sharpsburg, Maryland, a German pacifist sect, the Dunkards, made their home in a sea of wheat and corn. In Gettysburg, Pennsylvania, population 2,400, young men studied Latin and mathematics at the small college there. Steamboats filled with cotton came and went at Vicksburg on the Mississippi. In Washington, D.C., Senator Jefferson Davis reviewed plans for remodeling the Capitol. In Richmond, the 900 employees of the Tredegar Iron Works turned out gun carriages and cannon for the U.S. government. At West Point on the Hudson, officers trained, and friendships were formed they thought would last a lifetime.
In thinking of America, I sometimes find myself admiring her bright blue sky, her grand old woods, her fertile fields, her beautiful rivers, her mighty lakes and star-crowned mountains. But my rapture is soon checked when I remember that all is cursed with the infernal spirit of slaveholding and wrong. When I remember that with the waters of her noblest rivers, the tears of my brethren are borne to the ocean, disregarded and forgotten. That her most fertile fields drink daily the warm blood of my outraged sisters. I am filled with unutterable loathing. Cedric Douglass.
We are flying. We are
to the slave, a freed black man wrote, nor is it looked for. For the slave, it is all night forever. One white Mississippian was more blunt. I'd rather be dead, he said, than be a nigger on one of these big plantations. A slave entered the world in a one-room, dirt-floored shack, drafty in winter, reeking in summer. Slave cabins bred pneumonia, typhus, cholera, lockjaw, tuberculosis. The child who survived to be sent to the fields at 12 was likely to have rotten teeth, worms, dysentery, malaria. Fewer than 4 out of 100 lived to be 60. Work began at sunrise and continued as long as there was light. 14 hours sometimes, unless there was a full moon, when it went on still longer. Inspired by passionate leaders, Harriet Tubman called Moses by the slaves who followed her north to freedom. Wendell Phillips named the golden trumpet of abolitionism for his oratory. And Frederick Douglass, the son of a slave and a white man.
I appear this evening as a thief and robber. I stole this head, these limbs, this body from my master, and ran off with them.
Douglass was so eloquent that skeptics charged he could never have been a slave. In part to prove them wrong, he wrote an autobiography, purchased his freedom with $600 obtained from English admirers, and returned to the struggle. The abolitionists would raid. War began at 4:30 a.m. on the 12th of April, 1861. General Pierre Gustave Douton Beauregard ordered his Confederate gunners to open fire on Fort Sumter. At that hour, only a dark shade out in Charleston Harbor. Confederate Commander Beauregard was a gunner, so skilled as an artillery student at West Point that his instructor kept him on as an assistant for another year. That instructor was Major Robert Anderson, Union commander inside Fort Sumter.
All the pent-up hatred of the past months and years is voiced in the thunder of these cannon, and the people seem almost beside themselves in the exaltation of a freedom they deem already won.
The signal to fire the first shot was given by a civilian, Edmund Ruffin, a Virginia farmer and editor, who had preached secession for 20 years. Of course, he said, I was delighted to perform the service.
Would everyone please stand as we present the flag and greet our special guest, President Abraham Lincoln?
Well, fellow citizens, you may be seated. I've often asked myself how I get into this job of being the president during a time of a terrible civil war. I guess we could go back and reflect a little bit to my interest in politics. This man, Daniel Webster, who we heard talk tonight earlier, he and Henry Clay and Mary Todd mentioned was a good friend of her family's. Those two men really started the Whig Party, and I think that I was a Whig from the time I lived in Indiana and understood their policies about the economics and about how slavery should not be allowed to expand. I differed from my father. He was a Jacksonian Democrat, most poor people were, and I certainly came from
poor background economically. But when I moved with my family to Illinois, I seemed to be out on my own for the first time at age 21. And because I could read and write, some of the men in Illinois asked me if I would run for the state legislature. I gave it a try in 1832, and I found out one thing in a hurry: you don't always win. I lost, but 2 years later I had another go at it, and I had considerable success that time. Even managed to get myself reelected a few times. Probably I was never happier at any time in my life than those days I spent in New Salem among friends. But in 1837, I did move over to Springfield, our state capital, where Mr. John T. Stewart, a leader in that Whig party, had invited me to join him as his law partner. I became a law partner later on with Billy Herndon. Early in my stay in Springfield, I had been introduced to that charming young lady who had just recently arrived from Lexington, Kentucky. Mary Todd had come up to Springfield to live with an older married sister. Courtship developed. Our engagement was announced, and in 1842 we were married. Had a wonderful family, had 4 sons: Robert, Teddy, Eddie, and Willie. I had become more and more involved in politics, and in 1847, coming from a Whig stronghold in Illinois, I was elected to go to Washington and serve 1 term in our United States House of Representatives. Now, I figure folks are always going to remember that I was the president, but I doubt that many will recall that I served in our 30th Congress. And yet, that's where I first met Senator Jefferson Davis. Senator Daniel Webster was there, and our former president, John Quincy Adams, just couldn't stay out of politics. Once his presidential term was over, he hurried home to Massachusetts, got himself elected and then re-elected several times to the House of Representatives. I was present at the morning session of the House when he was stricken at his desk. 2 days later, we sadly heard the news that he had died that following evening, removed only for his own comfort, as far away as the office of the Speaker of the House of Representatives. When I completed my term in Congress, I returned to Illinois and I took up my law practice, and I think I would have been happy right there, just plodding life through among my friends, except for what happened in our country in 1854. That's the year the slavery question came to the surface. Our Democratic senator from Illinois, Stephen A. Douglas, had introduced a bill in Congress proposing eventual statehood for the territories of Kansas and Nebraska. But included in the judge's proposal was a call for free elections in each territory to decide upon allowing slavery within its borders. The Missouri Compromise had forbidden slavery out in that area. Although I had a strong sense of moral wrong over the issue of slavery, a story reached my ear once about a slave who had somehow managed to escape, and he did make his way up north by the Underground Railroad, but then he was captured. They brought him before a local court official who questioned just why he had run away from the plantation in the first place. The judge asked him, "Was your master cruel to you? Did he whip you?" "Oh, no, sir," he said. "Master was kind." "Well, did he starve you?" No, I had plenty to eat." "Did he make you work excessively long hours?" "No, I didn't have to work too hard." "Well," he said, "I am puzzled. If your master was kind to you, gave you plenty to eat, and didn't make you work too hard, why did you run away?" "Well, sir," he said, "I believe my job is still open if you care to go apply for it yourself." Well, I just never knew a man who would choose to be a slave himself. Our government began by affirming the equal rights of men. Somehow I felt that America should demonstrate moral leadership to the rest of the world with regard to the enslavement of people, and I felt the Douglas bill was going to do just the opposite. At our state fair in Springfield that year, a first attempt was made to form a new Republican Party out in Illinois. A goodly number of my old Whig friends indicated they would switch to that organization. Then in 1856, I became a member, and later that year up in Bloomington, I made a speech. affirming the power of Congress to prohibit slavery out in the Western territories. I hated the repeal of the Missouri Compromise. Because of all that, I reckon I talked myself right into the state leadership of the new political organization. Now, most folks back in Illinois knew, of course, there was a lot of good in Senator Douglas. Stephen A. Douglas, why, we have known each other since we were both young men, members of our Illinois state legislature back in Vandalia and Springfield. You heard Mary talk about him a while ago. She knew him when she first came to Springfield, and he and I have been pretty good friends. But I think people thought we had to be enemies because we were on opposite sides of the political fence. Stephen being a Democrat, me having been a Whig and now a Republican. But I always reasoned that men could have differences in their political views and still be friends. I certainly respected Stephen. I believe he respected me. They called Stephen Douglas the little giant. He was just about that tall, but he was a giant in the fact that he was such an intelligent leader in the Democratic Party. But friends or not, of course, now and then we could get mad at each other. Well, I was standing next to him one morning over in Quincy, Illinois, and he said something I know just to aggravate me. I turned to him, I said, Stephen Douglas, you are so small, I could probably have you for breakfast and still be hungry when it came lunchtime. He said, Lincoln, if you carry through with that plan, you'd have more brains in your stomach than you ever had in your head. Well, we really were pretty good friends. Stephen saw fit to run for re-election to the Senate in 1858, but on the platform that states and territories should not be interfered with over the issue of slavery. As the Republican candidate for United States Senator, I participated in a statewide canvass that found Judge Douglas and myself in some pretty heated debates. Do you know that newspaper editors from back in New England, Pennsylvania, Ohio, New York, sent reporters all the way out to Illinois to write their stories home about the Lincoln-Douglas debates. So I felt that at night people in Buffalo and Pittsburgh, Philadelphia and Allentown were picking up their newspapers and reading what Lincoln thought about slavery and other important issues. So after the Lincoln-Douglas debates were over, I felt I was far better known outside my home state of Illinois than I ever had been before. Stephen won the election. He went back to Washington. But 2 years later, 1860, that new Republican Party nominated me at their convention in Chicago to be their candidate for president. But my, what a strange time in America in 1860. Slavery, economic differences between North and South had driven a wedge in the Democratic Party. Northern state Democrats would say, Stephen Douglas is fine for president, in our view. But Southerners said, he really doesn't represent us on this slavery expansion bit. We're going to run the current Vice President, John Breckinridge. Two Democrats would race for the same office in 1860. Think of how that would affect their party vote. Then another man with the name of Bell came in on what he called the Union ticket. So we really had 4 presidential candidates in 1860. Well, when they counted all the votes, I had 40%. Not a majority, but it was more than either of the other 3 had. So I did have a slight electoral vote favorite, but you might say Lincoln sneaked in the back door to the White House in 1860 as the 16th president. Well, we had an election in November 1860. I wanted, but before Christmas, South Carolina said, we can't stand this man Lincoln. We can't trust him on slavery. So we're going to pull away from this union and call ourselves the new nation of South Carolina. I thought that was unconstitutional, but that's what she did. And by the time I took the oath of office as president, in March 4th, 1861, 6 more states had joined with South Carolina. We would have 7 states in a confederacy on the outside looking in at the time of my inauguration. I can remember so well the tension and what I tried to say, knowing the newspapers would carry my inaugural address into the South. I can remember standing at the Capitol building, giving my inaugural, and this one paragraph I tried to hit home with in the South. The Union is perpetual, as proclaimed by the history of the Union itself. The Union is much older than the Constitution. It was formed, in fact, by the Articles of Association in 1774. It was matured and continued by our Declaration of Independence in 1776. It was further matured in the faith of all the then 13 states, expressly plighted and engaged that it should be perpetual by the Articles of Confederation in 1778. Finally, in 1787, one of the declared objects for ordaining and establishing the Constitution was to form a more perfect union. But following my inauguration, tensions continued to mount between the states. Then on April 12th, Fort Sumter was fired on, and the bloodiest war in our nation's history had begun. The early part of our Civil War just seemed to bring me frustration after frustration. Superior in manpower and industry, Northern forces found themselves losing in most conflicts with the Confederate Army. Concerned in my own personal army, the Army of the Potomac, I had originally felt that General McClellan could offer some outstanding leadership, but he developed a bad case of the slows. He failed to move his troops, constantly reporting to me that his men were outnumbered or that they were in a state of fatigue, unable to oppose the armies of General Johnston or General Lee. That stomached me a little. I sent a message to the general stating that if he had no plans for his army, perhaps I could borrow it for a while. Little Mac, as his men called him, often wired me or Stanton over at the War Department, demanding that we do send more troops to him. Why, his intelligence sources were giving him mighty inflated numbers about the troop strength of the Confederate Army. He was believing it. Finally, I had to replace McClellan. I gave the command to General Burnside and then to Lieutenant Joe Hooker. And when we reviewed our military situation out here in the East in mid-1863, the only thing we had that even looked like a victory was the battle down at Antietam Creek in September of 1862. My generals out here in the East just simply didn't want to fight. Fortunately, our forces out west under General Grant and General Sherman were having far more success than this Army of the Potomac, although the latter army, under the fresh command of General George Gordon Meade, a man from Philadelphia, achieved an outstanding victory during the first 3 days of July in a little village in the state of Pennsylvania called Gettysburg. Oh, I know you've all heard of the horrible bloodbath that took place there. For 3 days, they killed and wounded each other. The Union Army formed a strong defense line, similar to a giant fishhook just south of the town on the high ground. Successfully, it withstood Confederate assaults. The first evening on its right flank, the second day on both flanks, and the third day it managed to hold its center against that magnificent onslaught of Pickett's charge. There's a bit of irony there. When I was back in that 30th Congress, I appointed George Pickett to West Point, and at Gettysburg he led a charge of more than 12,000 Confederates through an open field, right into the center of the Union line. Driven back, he had lost half the men he started with. The following day was the 4th of July. A torrential downpour had set in, making it all the more difficult for these men to retreat against that heavy rain and deep mud. The wagon train with just his wounded men stretched for more than 17 miles. But the same day, I received an inspiring telegram from General Grant telling me that his army had taken Vicksburg on the Mississippi River. And now that river could flow free to the Gulf of Mexico with Union ships. I felt those 2 victories, Gettysburg and Vicksburg, meant the war would be over soon. I'd be president again of the reunited states, and I'd have to be looking for ways to help bind up and heal our nation's wounds. I received a letter that summer from over in Philadelphia from Sarah Josepha Hale. She was the editor of a fashion magazine for women called Godey's Ladies Book, but I remembered her too. She had written a nursery rhyme I always enjoyed reading to my boys when they were young. Mary Had a Little Lamb. Mr. Lincoln, she asked, now that we've had victories at Gettysburg and Vicksburg, could you see fit to set aside a day this fall for a national observance of Thanksgiving? Well, now I had known that states had already been celebrating that holiday. New York, though, would celebrate it sometimes in late August, whenever the governor said. And the 6 New England states had 6 different days in the fall of the year when each one of them celebrated Thanksgiving. It was my hope that all Americans might feel closer together if they realized that one particular day had been set aside for them to pause, to thank the Almighty for the many blessings He had bestowed upon our land and upon our people. So it was that Thursday, November 26th in 1863, the fall after the Battle of Gettysburg, was the date I proclaimed as our first National Day of Thanksgiving. I was asked to come to Gettysburg November the 19th in 1863 and have a part in the dedication of the National Cemetery there. I was not to be the main speaker. Mr. Edward Everett, former president of Harvard, probably the finest orator in the country, was to hold forth with a 2-hour oration. I was to make a few appropriate remarks. I must tell you, Mrs. Lincoln really didn't want me to go to Gettysburg, and you can understand why. When we still lived in Springfield, our 4-year-old son Eddie had died of diphtheria. Now at the White House in 1862, our 11-year-old son Willie was riding horseback in January of that year. It started to rain, and before he could get the horse to the stable, the boy was soaked. The next day, he complained of chills and went into a fever. He developed pneumonia, and he died in February of 1862. So you can understand when Taddy came down with some illness in November of 1863, Mrs. Lincoln would not want me to be out of Washington. However, our family physician, Dr. Stone, advised me that Taddy merely had a mild case of smallpox. He would be all right for me to go ahead and make the trip. I arrived by train with my party in Gettysburg the evening of, late afternoon on the 18th. It was a Wednesday. Gettysburg had a population of 2,400, but I think about 15,000 folks had gathered for this event. They led me from the train station through the crowded street to get to Judge Will's home, where I was to be an overnight guest. I was a little amused at something I heard. As we walked through the street to get to the judge's home, I heard a newspaper reporter who had traveled with us on the train telling a group of people behind me he had seen the president writing his speech on the back of an envelope while coming from Washington. Well, that was nonsense. Train rides were so bumpy, if I would have written anything, I probably never could have read one, right? I had written most of the Gettysburg address on White House stationery before leaving Washington. That night at Judge Will's home, where I stayed in Gettysburg, right down on the diamond, I asked for a piece of fool's cap, and after I retired from my room, I completed the Gettysburg address on that piece of fool's cap, so the next day at the cemetery, I held 2 pages in my hand. Certainly not an envelope. 19th of November could have been snow or sleet, but it turned out to be a pretty nice day. I got to ride horseback in the parade that would take me down to the cemetery. We approached the cemetery through the south gate, and I saw that they had constructed a platform to hold 30 dignitaries. Some of them were my friends, governors of northern states. But when I stepped up on that platform, I looked down and I saw graves in semicircle form, 5 rows. They were some of the men who had died there. Many of the men who died there were retrieved by their relatives and taken home to be buried in their local plots. But there's a representation of more than 1,500 men at Gettysburg today who were killed in that terrible battle. I was overcome by it. They were willing to die for something they would never see, a better life for future generations. So when I spoke at Gettysburg, I made reference to the Declaration of Independence, the idea that our country was founded on the belief that here, it didn't make any difference what religion you were, didn't make any difference if you were a man or a woman or what color your skin was. This was to be the country where everybody was to be treated equally. Here's what I said. 407 years ago, our fathers brought forth on this continent a new nation, conceived in liberty, and dedicated to the proposition that all men are created equal. Now we are engaged in a great civil war, testing whether that nation, or any nation so conceived and so dedicated, can long endure. We are men on a great battlefield of that war. We have come to dedicate a portion of that field as a final resting place for those who here gave their lives that that nation might live. It is altogether fitting and proper that we should do this. But in a larger sense, we cannot dedicate. We cannot consecrate. We cannot hallow this ground. The brave men, living and dead, who struggled here, have consecrated it far above our poor power to add or detract. The world will little know nor long remember what we say here, but it can never forget what they did here. It is for us, the living, rather to be dedicated here to the unfinished work which they who fought here have thus far so nobly advanced. It is rather for us to be here dedicated to the great task remaining before us, that from these honored dead, we take increased devotion to that cause for which they gave the last full measure of devotion. That we here highly resolve that these dead shall not have died in vain, that this nation, under God, shall have a new birth of freedom, and the government of the people, by the people, for the people, shall not perish from the earth.
A display of the battles of the Civil War done by the students during the cafeteria. Special taste tables have been provided by our student food committee, and they will be your hostesses at our president's reception. Please join us in the cafeteria following the conclusion of this program. I'd like to thank you all for coming, and I want you to know that this is a unique experience for everybody. Thank you very much, and see you.
You probably didn't know that Abraham Lincoln was in the Northwoods recently. But Honest Abe was here. Actually, it wasn't really the former president. Rather, the memoirs of Abraham Lincoln was being performed in Anago's Studio A, and Mr. Lincoln is actually California actor Granville Sonny Van Dusen. Northwoods Magazine caught up with Sonny Van Dusen to learn the latest secrets from him on Lincoln, Hollywood, and even makeup.
I use all kinds. I use pancake